And thanks for being with us on a Saturday. We are recording this meeting. We're receiving that question. So if you are communicating with other families or colleagues, anyone who's interested but not able to attend, we will post this following the meeting and share it. All right. So again, welcome. Before we officially get started, I want to make sure that anyone who would like interpretation support knows to click the button with the circle that looks sort of like a globe. Si desea escuchar esta conversación en español, haga clic en el botón interpretación. And we have that in both Spanish and Portuguese. As we're going, if you have questions, please add those questions in the Q&A tab rather than the chat. That will allow other people with the same question to give it a thumbs up and show us which questions many people are wondering, and keep track of which ones we've answered. So we don't want your questions to get lost in the chat, so please use the Q&A, question and answer function. If you would prefer to say your question as opposed to write it, you can also use the raise hand button, that button in blue, if you prefer. So as I've, hopefully you've heard me say before, but I always want to start just with my gratitude to you, all the families who have supported your children through this very unique context and time, and supported their learning. We are so grateful for the partnership, and we hope that the partnerships that have deepened through this experience will only continue. I also want to offer my just genuine condolences for anyone listening who has gone through and had a direct impact with the virus, whether you've lost a loved one or the virus yourselves. We're just wishing you just all the health and peace through this very, very challenging time, knowing how hard it's hit, not just our world and our nation, but especially our CF community. So many of you were probably with us for a very late night Thursday. It's still probably catching up on sleep from that. But there was a rich discussion with lots of public comment from all of you, and we thank you for voicing the perspectives of families and teachers and staff and the whole community. If you weren't there and you haven't seen some of the messages we sent out yesterday, the board voted to start fully virtual. They also, though, wanted to ensure that families have choice. So we will assume that your student, your child, is starting fully virtual, but we will have an in-person option for families who need it. The other thing that's important to know about the board's vote is that it is for the entire first quarter of the school year. So that will run September 14th to November 19th. So for those 2 months, you'll have a choice to make. We'll assume you're choosing distance learning, but again, if you have a need as your family, that choice that your family makes to be in person, then please do let your school know. Every family should have received 2 messages yesterday, at least 2 messages. One was a letter from me, and then your school would have followed up. If you didn't get those messages, it means that our schools do not have your most recent contact info. And so we would ask that you would please reach out next week to your child's school. If you did get those messages, awesome, we are in touch, and you know that we're asking families to really think about this decision and let us know by Wednesday at the latest. That will allow us to ensure that we have the classes and the teachers and the students set up for the different options that families chose. Now, I want to be really, really open about the realities of these choices, because they both have pieces, elements that are not ideal, right? In this pandemic context, no option is great. And I say that as your superintendent, but also as a parent, making these same decisions for my children. So if you don't respond, we'll assume that you're choosing distance learning. What that means is, much like the spring, your child is learning from home. For 7th to 12th graders, we will distribute Chromebooks starting next week. For pre-K to 6, this would not have technology yet to support it. And so I want to be really clear about that. Now, obviously, the most important way to make this choice is about safety. And we want the health and safety of everyone to be the top priority. But we also want to be really clear, as those responsible for the education of your children, that it will look different than the spring, in that we have ordered enough devices in March. As soon as this happened in March, we ordered over 3,000 devices to ensure that every student in Central Falls would have their own device. But because everyone around the country, and even more broadly, did the same, and millions and millions and millions of Chromebooks were being ordered, we have only received a third of the ones we ordered. So we have 1,000 Chromebooks ready to go, but we do not have the other Chromebooks yet. And so I just want to be really clear that distance learning for pre-K to 6th grade would not start with a Chromebook. As the shipments arrive, and we are working hard every day to even see if we can go to Best Buy and buy another 10 more, anything we can do to get more devices, we are doing. But I cannot guarantee anyone from pre-K to 6th grade a device yet. Within distance learning, the other thing I want to share is that there's actually 2 different distance learning options. If you are a family where your child has a medical reason they cannot come in, a medical need that would be impacted by COVID. I think one strong example is asthma. If your child has asthma and you have a doctor's note, there is an option for a statewide Rhode Island distance learning option that will run the entire school year. So where districts are being encouraged to bring kids back in person as it's safe, and we don't know when that will be because we don't know what the virus will be doing in Central Falls. If you choose the CF version, it may change at some point. Whereas if you choose the RIDE version, because you have medical reasons that you can't come in, your student will have that option for the whole year. So I just want to share those 2 options. And as you're speaking with your child's teacher or principal or homeschool liaison, that you know that there is that option. If you shared that with us back in July when we called all 3,000 families, we have that noted. So far, we have 107 of you who have said, I have a medical reason, my child cannot come in the building. And so those students will be in the Rhode Island-wide distance learning option. Everyone else will be assumed to be in our Central Falls distance learning option. And then if you as your family decide in-person is really so important for our family, for whatever reason, work, student learning preferences, then you will have an option for 2 days in person. It should be assumed, if you're choosing in person, that that's happening 2 days a week. There are a few students who might have a 4-day option, but that has to do with their individual.
Los niños vengan a la escuela por 2 días y 3 días van a hacer la distancia. Para estudiantes que tienen necesidades especiales, entonces va a haber una opción de 4 días para venir a la escuela.
If you have a medical need, we can bring you from CF distance learning into Rhode Island-wide distance learning. And if you have some other reason why you need your child to be with us in person, you can opt in for 2 days a week, okay? Distance learning in CF, distance learning with the state due to medical, or 2 days in person. We're hoping, I know this has been a summer of so many complex, it's hard to even know what the options are. So today and this morning, I hope I can clarify that we're really talking about 3 options. Distance learning in Central Falls, distance learning with the state due to medical, and in person for 2 days a week. If you're choosing in person, I want to just share a sample schedule. This might look familiar because we've tried to consistently use this framework. Monday, district-wide, will be distance learning for all students. If you're choosing in person, your child will be assigned either to Group A and come on Tuesday and Thursday, or Group B and come Wednesday and Friday. I shared this at the board meeting, but do want to reiterate that because the safety and health of our students and our staff, the whole community, families whose children return home to, is our top priority. That if your student will be in person, we are working to layer as many protections as we can. So the most important is a mask. If you have one that your child prefers, please send him or her with it if you choose this option. But if not, we have masks that we can provide. We will also be reducing the number of students in each class, which is why we're going with the A-B schedule. And so since we'll assume students are choosing distance learning, but then some families will choose in person, we anticipate those numbers to be even less than the 15 that we had discussed at the board meeting, but we won't know until each family shares their preference by Wednesday. Students will not be interacting with students in other classes, so we'll try to maintain those stable pods. That is another layer of protection. Distancing with as great distance as we can. If we have fewer students in the classroom, we'll expand that as much as possible. And having upgraded the filtration and circulation systems in our schools. Since the board voted for the vast majority to start with distance learning, we also now have the opportunity to ensure that the classrooms we use we'll prioritize classrooms that have even higher filtration than the standard. So the way that the Center for Disease Control describes it is that you need to have circled out fresh air 6 times per hour. And so in the rooms where we can guarantee 6 or even higher is where we'd want to prioritize those in-person learning spaces. I've shared a little bit about filtration and the air quality already, but also just want to share that we have hired additional custodians. So in addition to the team that's already in a building, which ranges depending on the size of the school. So a smaller school currently has 1 custodian, but the high school has a team. We will add another custodian so that they can really focus on cleaning down bathrooms and high traffic areas where we'd want to even further reduce possible spread of the virus. And so 1 in each school plus 2 additional custodians at night to make sure that every building is deep cleaned. While we anticipate the majority of students will be in our CF distance learning option, I thought it was important to still share that we are obviously working towards a day when we can have all our students back in school. And so we will be continuously strengthening all of these facilities and cleaning procedures. Last slide before I shift to question and answer, but just wanted to make sure I could sort of frame what we know as of this moment. Device pickup for 7th to 12th graders will begin on Wednesday, the 9th. We will be doing it with assigned time slots. Different grades will have a different day. And so you should not come until you have received an assigned time and location. So it's going to be very important to receive that information so that you get the device that is assigned and at the right time and place. We want to ensure that the pickup of the devices does not create opportunity for the virus to spread. And so there will be different locations and times where a student would come and get their device. So with that, I want to pull up the Q&A and really turn it over to the questions that anyone who is participating has. Okay, I see we've got 10 in the Q&A already, so let me pull that up. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now since it's hard for, I don't get to see the Q&A and my screen at once until someone teaches me. Okay, so good morning to everyone who wrote in, and thank you for your questions. I think these will be helpful for everyone. So the first question from Ashley B. Good morning, Ashley. Ashley's one of our parents who spoke at the rally at the State House. So also want to just say thank you to Ashley and all the families who have advocated and helped us to ensure that all our teachers got recalled. So huge thanks for that. So Ashley says, how many students will be in a class? Will it be 15 or will it be more? So we can guarantee there will not be more than 15 students in a class because one, we're assuming distance learning. But even if every family said, I need an in-person option, which we know is not the case because we've already had a lot of families tell us, I definitely want distance. Even if every family had opted into in-person, we're doing the A, B to ensure that there will never be more than 15 students in a class for this first quarter. While we hope that the virus will certainly get more and more contained, what we have been given as guidance is that we really need 4 weeks of the virus being below that 100 threshold to know that it would be safe to have a full classroom of students. Okay. Let's see. Another question, will students who attend be on an A-B schedule? Yes, if your family chooses in person, your child will be on an A, Tuesday, Thursday, or B, Wednesday, Friday schedule. The only exception to that is for students who have IEPs, individualized education programs, recommending a program that already has 15 or fewer students. So in the event, this example is one that I actually taught. So I was an elementary special education teacher that taught a self-contained program. So I already had a reduced class size because that's how my students learned best, and that was what was needed for their individualized education program. So those programs will run 4 days a week, so no Monday, but those students, and again, it would already be something that is IEP driven, could have the option for in-person Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Scanning more questions. Great question from Danielle. She asks, how do I sign my child up for partial in-person? So that's a great question. I want to make sure everyone has this info. All you would have to do is if you got a text message from your child's school yesterday afternoon and they went out to everyone for whom we have contact info, all you'd have to do is text back in person. And then that message comes to us, and we then know to ensure your child is placed in either an A or B schedule, and we'll get back to you next week about whether that's A or B. If you want if you want virtual, distance, home, you don't need to do anything. So right now we are assuming every student is distance learning unless we hear from you. So I'll use Danielle as an example. she could either text back to the message yesterday in person and she'd be done, or on Tuesday when schools are open again, you can just call your child's school and they will note in person. We have a master spreadsheet for all 3,000 students and we are keeping track of it there. Also, if you called the main office for the district, we all have access to that same tracker of families' choices, and so we could track it there too. Okay, such a great question coming in from one of our anonymous attendees, and I asked the same question of the state yesterday, so great minds think alike. Anonymous attendee says, if a family chooses the state option for medical reasons, will the state provide a Chromebook or device? I asked the same question and they said no, that the district would be providing that device. What I would say is we will we will prioritize those 107 students who have already said to us, I have a medical need. As soon as you provide us with that doctor's note, we will prioritize you having a device. Yeah, we know you cannot come into the building, and so we will figure that out either with the state or internally. These are really great questions, and I'm so grateful for each of them. Let's go to, oh, so Amanda said, will there be some sort of a drive-by meet and greet for teachers and students? Amanda, that is such a great question. And I want to tell you, our teachers and school leaders have actually been designing something like this all summer. And so it's sort of, the plans have changed and the virus keeps changing. And so what that will look like exactly will come in a communication this week from your child's school. But we absolutely think it's important for our kids to meet their teachers. So some of this will happen virtually. Some of it will happen outdoors. So there's a lot of different models, but much like the choice that the board voted on, we will assume that that will happen in a virtual way. But if your family says, I really think that's important to be in person, we'll find a way to do that outside in a socially distant, safe way. So hopefully that answers your question, and know that teachers want that opportunity greatly. We just want to make sure we do it in the safest way possible for you and them. And so more details will come this week because we've had to change those plans a few times depending on how the virus has been impacting. All right, trying to scan for different people, but I appreciate some of you have written in a few questions, so we will certainly try to circle back. So another person asked, how would I know if I'm in A or B? You wouldn't know yet, so you haven't missed any information. We need to know who is choosing in person, who has that need, and then we can assign the groups. So we had groups. It's not like we're sitting around not working on plans. We had groups. Every student was assigned to an A and a B, but after the plan changed on Thursday night, we now need to redo that so that it makes sense with the new model of assuming students are doing distance learning, and then reassign so that there are balanced groups for the students who are in person. Okay, let's see. Questions are flying in, so I want to make sure. Remember also, if you want to use that thumbs up feature, if someone is asking a question that you have too, when I see the ones that have the most thumbs, it's a great way for me to know this is a question a lot of people want to hear the answer to. So a really important question with three of you who have given it a thumbs up says, how will my kids do distance learning with no Chromebooks? This is the biggest challenge. I'm not going to even sugarcoat it. It's one of the reasons why we had originally proposed that pre-K to 6 would be on a hybrid, because then it's really hard to do 5 days at home without technology. That said, if you do not feel that your child is safe in the building, we don't want you to make a choice that's not safe. And so what we'll do is teachers who are the most incredible and most valuable people I know, they change their plans yet again. So even if they had been designing certain lessons, they started to put together packets of materials. I was at one of our elementary schools the other day, and in between their professional learning, they were putting together pouches of supplies with math manipulatives and hundreds charts and a box of crayons. And we will then be distributing some of the learning materials in the same way that we distribute the meals, and ensuring that there are still learning opportunities. And then many of you might even have used Class Dojo back in the spring, where through a cell phone, you could then take a photo of the work and share it back with your child's teacher. But I will be honest, it is not ideal. It is not ideal. As we get devices, we will be distributing those, of course. But I don't want to give false hope there, because some of the delivery dates are many months away. So sort of a follow-up to that, someone said, so what happened to all the Chromebooks? So a couple things happened. One is the devices that were distributed, I'm sure you noticed, were pretty old. So some of those devices no longer can take updates. And so they cannot necessarily support the learning. That said, we do have some of those devices that are not ideal, but they are a device. And so one thing we are working on is using those for some of our younger students until we can get them a brand new Chromebook. So it's a great question, and we are certainly going to distribute everything we have, but I just wanted people to know that some of those devices are now 6-7 years old. And so I know that can be really frustrating when the device is not working optimally. So the new devices are coming, but we will plan to distribute those older Chromebooks, but wouldn't want that to be assumed to be sufficient. That is a device that you could then keep. It should be able to do some web browsing and access a Google Classroom, but it would not necessarily have all the functionality that a newer device, which we have ordered for every single student, would have. Okay, let's see some of our other questions with a bunch of thumbs. Let's see, we just answered that. I'm going to toss this one over to anyone else on the panel who may know. There's a question of, do you know if families are going to be getting those EBT cards to help with groceries and food? Patricia, I think you're on here and you often know a lot more about this area. Are you able to? Thank you. I see you just.
Good morning. Thank you everyone for joining. What we would do is we would confirm week and send a message to families to let them know where in what day of the month the EBT would come into their houses. One of the things that we learned last year is that many families did not get the EBT card. And I think it's important that you communicate with the schools to make sure that we have the correct contact information, name of the child or the guardian, and the address. Because unfortunately, as we found out throughout the pandemic, was that a lot of families had changed their addresses and did not notify the school, and therefore those cards went to another address. So we will send another message next week, once we confirm with the Department of Human Services and the Department of Education.
Thank you, Patricia. There's a great question. It's a thoughtful question about, I think, a concern for the district if a family were to choose the the statewide RIDE distance learning option. Would the district lose funding? No, we would not. So no one should hesitate. If your child has a medical need and you need that guarantee of a virtual learning option from home for the year for your child's health and safety, and you have that medical note, you should do that option and call your child's school, and we will note that and we will get them enrolled. They actually will still be a student of our district, and because I think the question is actually from a staff member, they would be coded as a 190. So they will still be a CF student. They will be with us post-pandemic, but for this year, they would attend as a 190. Okay. Some of these questions, they're such great questions and are very similar to ones we've answered. So if I don't read it verbatim, just as you wrote it, know that I'm sort of grouping a few. So this is a great question. I appreciate how thoughtful all of you are about this and wanting to ensure safety. So one anonymous attendee said, how are any pods stable if kids are entering and leaving the buildings in groups? So your teachers and principals and support staff have been mapping out different ways to ensure that arrival and dismissal looks different than it normally would. Every door to a school would be used, so you might not even enter in the same way that you did in a previous year. We want to reduce the traffic, the opportunities where people would be passing or clustering in groups. So we've even started to discuss sort of windows of time when different grades might arrive so that we can really minimize the number of people who would be entering from a given entrance or exit at any time. So we're working to eliminate that cross-pod situation. Thank you for that question. So a lot of questions about who is my child's teacher. I know this is such a different year where you would normally know who that person is by now. I know I'm feeling that from my own kids. They keep asking me, what's my teacher's name? They just want to know. We have those lists. They are generated, but due to this shift, some of that might change. So rather than telling you, we're trying to wait until things are certain. So I would anticipate that at the end of next week, you will get confirmation from your child's teacher, introducing themselves, scheduling a time for that family orientation, which will likely be virtual, but for some might be an outdoor hello. And so end of next week. So Monday's a holiday. Tuesday, everyone go out and vote safely. Wednesday will be when your decision is, the deadline for your decision. Again, we're assuming you're choosing virtual, but if you want to tell us in person, you need to do that by Wednesday. And from there, we can finalize all the class lists, and you'll hear from your teacher Thursday or Friday. Soul writes, will parents get a phone call to find out what's the plan for my child? So I do want to let you know we've shifted to a new family communication platform called Kinvo. And so you will probably be getting more texts from your child's teacher, principal, district than ever before. And it's really neat because it allows us to text both ways. So you should have received a text yesterday from your child's school that said, hi, I'm reaching out from Ella Risk, and we'll assume that your child is doing distance learning unless you write back and tell us in person. So we know we reached over 2,000 families yesterday with those messages, but also that some people may have changed their number, or we didn't have it correct in our system. So if you did not hear from your child's school yesterday, please reach out to them on Tuesday, because it means we don't have the right contact info for you. This is a really important question from another anonymous attendee that I want to address. Do parents have the option to change their choice after Wednesday? This is a little tricky. Not really. To have these stable pods and the amount of steps that go into ensuring that we have a teacher with the right certification for your child and no more than 15 students and all these different pieces, it's not something where on a day-to-day basis you could change. That said, we of course want to try our best to accommodate the tricky situations that we know are real. So what I would say is you should assume you are making a choice through mid-November. But if there was some circumstance that you needed to be considered for a change, you should reach out to your child's school. It would not happen right away, but we would work to see, is there a room that could safely have another student? So it would not be an easy shift to make, and it would not happen immediately. But of course, we would want to try to make a situation possible for you and your family. Okay, I see one with 7 thumbs up. This is our highest number yet, so let me see what they're asking. Okay, so Jab8410, thank you for your question. What if you decide to do distance learning and you already have a Chromebook? Would my child still need to do the packet? Such a good question. I'm gonna see if a few of our principals of the elementary schools are on here, and so I wanna turn it over. What I do wanna preface, and I know it's frustrating to not have perfect answers, is that I hope you can bear with us that this plan has not even been in place for 48 hours, okay? So we all went to bed after the board meeting ended at 10:30 on Thursday night and tried to redo everything on Friday. And here we are Saturday morning. So there has been one work day in between this shift. And so I just want to thank you for understanding that everyone is working so hard to now make new plans. But this is a new wondering of ours. And so we actually talked about it as a school leader team yesterday, because there will be some families who have devices, but not all. And so we're trying to figure that out. Are any of our elementary principals interested in answering this, or should I share a little bit about some of the asynchronous pieces that we discussed?
I can answer, Stephanie.
Thank you.
So good morning, everybody. This is Principal Limer from Raices. So the question was around if you have a Chromebook, yes?
Yes.
Stephanie? Okay. So what we plan to do at our school is to survey every family to find out how many families actually have devices at home, which is going to help us make decisions about what we do with instruction. So our current plan, assuming that no one has a device, is that we would prepare materials and make sure to distribute them so that anyone who is distance learning has access to the learning. We also have some curricular materials like math workbooks that we would use in the classroom anyway that can be used at home. Now, if we find out that the majority of students do have a device, that will help teachers to plan what instruction could look like so that we're doing more online and then accommodating those students who do not have a device. But at the moment, as Dr. Toledo said, we still have a lot of information to gather, and our teachers are doing an amazing job of thinking through all of these different scenarios. So I will just repeat a portion of that in Spanish for people who are here. So, si usted tiene una computadora en la casa, tenemos que cuestionar a todas las familias en nuestra escuela sobre si encontramos que todos tienen como una computadora, un Chromebook, algo que se puede usar para aprender online, podemos planear la instrucción en una manera diferente en que estamos haciendo ahora. Ahora mismo estamos planeando que nadie tiene una computadora en casa, pero nuestras maestras son fabulosas y están planeando y cambiando sus planes día por día. So, gracias por su paciencia. And I will hand it over to Dr. Comet because he may have a different answer for ELARISC.
Thank you, Ms. Limer. Actually, I was just thinking that my response would be exactly the same. The only thing that I would add would be that next week, and I'm sure this is going to be happening across the board, next week we will be having a family forum. I'm going to have one on Tuesday. I'll be sending an invite out to make sure that I can answer any questions that we have answers to, more specifically related to ELARISC. So be looking for that invitation. We will probably have that on Tuesday evening to answer your specific questions so that you can make the most informed decision for your family. The second piece of that is once we have all of that piece taken care of, who's doing which model, who's A day, who's B day, who is your teacher, all of that stuff, then we will get that information out to you, and then likely on Thursday or Friday have another question and answer session with families so that we can clarify any questions people still have before we go into our family transition orientation the following Monday on the 14th and 15th. So this will be a very busy week. We are doing the same thing in all of the elementary schools. We're working very closely together to try to provide consistency at the elementary level so that regardless of which school your student is enrolled in, your child is enrolled in, there will be equitable access to the educational programming.
Thank you so much to both of those leaders. I want to now actually address a secondary question, and I see we've got both our full leadership team from the high school, Principal McCarthy and Assistant Principal Hill are both here. So in the same way that we wanted to be really transparent about some of the barriers of distance learning for pre-K to 6, I'm wondering if either of you could speak to the barriers of in-person learning. So it's sort of the reverse for our secondary students. So there are questions in here asking, is 7 to 12 fully distance? And I'm wondering if either of you want to speak to that, or I can certainly elaborate, but I think it's important for families to understand that in person at secondary, would be very different than in person during a non-COVID time.
Sure. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday. Just to speak to that question of what the in-person model will look like, again, as it has been mentioned quite a few times during this forum, it depends on what the numbers are. So yesterday you should have received a text message from myself that asked for you to reply in person if you wanted to opt in person. If you do not reply, we will assume that you're choosing distance learning. You also can reply with distance learning if you so choose, just to ensure that we know what you want, but no need to reply if you want distance learning. So until we know the true numbers of what everyone in our community would like, it will be hard for us to speak exactly on what in-person will look like. But we're imagining that fewer people will choose in-person, which means with an A-B schedule, your student could be coming to school, let's just say on Tuesday for A schedule, and they might be the only student in their classroom while their teacher still has the other students online. So about 14 students online on an A day and 1 student in person, which means that the teacher likely would be still
Pessoalmente.
teaching the full lesson through
Então, o
the
que vai
computer.
acontecer?
So in that case, if your student is in person, they would be able to raise their hand and still get questions answered. And maybe that's a little bit easier for some students. Myself as a former math teacher, I could understand how it could be a little bit easier to get your answers question in person. However, if the majority of the students are online, then the lesson will be through the online platform, whether it be Zoom or Google Meets, also using Google Classroom. If the majority of students are in the classroom, but a couple students are still online, we still need to give the format. Each teacher will have their choice of how to structure their format. So they might have an introductory lesson for the first 15 or 20 minutes of class where everyone is on the Google Meet or in the class like lecture. And then the next 15 minutes might be work on your own. So the teacher would be walking around the classroom or up on the whiteboard, you know, instructing students in that more traditional sense. But if a student was online, they would still be able to raise their hand and get the teacher's attention through a chat or have attention that way. Again, if you received a text message, then please text us back with your preference in person or distance learning. If after this forum, you want to change your option, hopefully you are set in your way, but if you really are now preferring distance learning, please give the school a call just to specify, to have that conversation with our homeschool liaison, and they'll be able to answer your questions and help you out.
Thank you. Okay, I've been trying to type a few responses while some of our principals were sharing, because I know we're nearing the end of our time. As I know Dr. Comet said that his school will be having a similar forum next week. I know many of the schools are thinking about that, and I am happy to continue to have these district-wide discussions, although I know some of the questions are more appropriate to ask where you could speak directly with your principal. So we'll try to continue to offer both. Before we go though, hoping we can answer a few more of the questions where multiple people are asking. Okay, so let's see. What if you don't have internet access? Such a great question. So if you don't have internet access and you do not want your child in school, you want that distance learning option, we are working on a few solutions. We do have hotspots for those who need it, but much like the spring, we are still advocating for a citywide solution. So I'm working in collaboration with the charter schools in Central Falls, and we are trying to have the state support providing internet for everyone in Central Falls, because we know that is a real reality, a real hurdle to distance learning. So thank you for raising that. Okay. Oh, such an important question. About, you know, when students are younger and may not understand the mask wearing, how are we handling situations where students wouldn't want to wear their masks? So we are expecting all students to wear masks. If you can, something I know I'm trying with my kids at home is to just even practice. Like we'll go, you know, run an errand and practice wearing the mask, try to get them more and more used to it, because it is so different, and I think even challenging for a lot of adults to keep their masks on. So we are working on building in mask breaks, where students can be outside and have some time without their mask, or even during like a silent reading, independent reading time, where students could have a mask off as long as they're not talking. The Department of Health says that is actually safe, because there's no aerosol. Of course, if there was a sneeze, that I'm not saying it's not a perfect plan. But building in mask breaks, I'd say, is the biggest thing. And then every classroom, we've already received in district, they're getting distributed a gallon of hand sanitizer per classroom per month is the amount that we have planned for. And then also opportunities and access to sinks with soap and water, so that students can also be cleaning their hands in between. There's deep cleaning happening every night, and then surface wipes for within the day. So hopefully that speaks to some of those questions. A lot of cleaning questions. And so I also am happy to invite our facilities director to come and speak to some of these questions. If it might be helpful to hear from the person specifically leading that work, we could invite Mr. Rory Marty to be part of the next Family Forum. But please know that we have been designing protocols to enhance the cleaning, the disinfecting, the air filtration, but absolutely still want to reiterate the board's decision was to start full distance learning unless you need your child to be in school. So we will assume that families, that every student, all 3,000 of our students, are in distance learning unless you opt in to in-person. I want to see if we can get a few more questions answered. If my child is in group A or B, will the other 2 days be distance learning? Yep. So Monday's distance learning for everybody, and then alternating A, B, A, B. So 3 days a week you would be distance learning, 2 days a week you would be in person if you opt in for that option. There's a question from Jennifer about students who, and I just want to confirm, I know it was so great that Principal Limer offered to translate. I do want to confirm we have interpreters, so I don't want anyone to think that this has just been a monolingual discussion, because questions are coming in multilingually too, and being translated. So we are supporting families, whatever their language preference. So this question is in Spanish and asking about the supports for students who have an IEP, and a medical condition. And so how would they get their therapies? And so it's such an important question, and we will make sure that every service on that IEP is provided. There are unique situations where it might make sense to bring the IEP team back together and say, what is the best way to do this? What is the safest way to do this? And so some of those therapies may happen through technology. We know those situations, and so have set aside some devices for our students who have IEPs and need to be learning from home. Again, if there is a medical documented need, you can also be part of the statewide distance learning option, and then your related services, so speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy would still be provided by the district. One thing we're considering to that exact question is on Mondays, when we are full distance learning and therefore there are no students in the school, that we could schedule therapies on that day so that students would not be interacting with any peers, but could come in for a therapy if it needed to be done in person. Okay. Important question about nursing that I want to speak to. Does every building have a full-time nurse to take care of sick kids? So at this time, and if you know anyone who is looking for a job as a nurse, we are hiring. We are hiring for more nurses to ensure that we're working towards every school having a nurse. We are also working with the state to have a good, significant group of nursing students to come and be additional support. So we actually are hoping to have more than one person who is either training towards or trained as a nurse in each of our schools. Something that we are certainly considering is also because most students will start virtual and then only students' families who are opting into in-person, we may have students in fewer buildings to ensure that we have a nurse in every building. But that will really depend. We won't know that for sure until we see how many students opt in, how many families opt in. But for example, we have 3 elementary schools. If there were only a few students opting for in-person at VETS, we might have those students come to Ella Risk for this time. It wouldn't make sense to run a whole building without a nurse, and at this time without a principal, with a small number of students. So again, we will wait and see how many families from each school choose in person, but we are considering an option where, because we anticipate it being a small percentage of families who choose to opt in, where we may work across schools, but never at the point where we would be putting more than 15 students in a class. I want to make sure that's clear. And I see I've got people helping answer questions. So I just also want to thank everyone on the panel and some of our board members. I see a lot of people who are just jumping in to make sure every question gets answered. So thank you to all of you for that. Let's do one more question before we wrap up. But again, can schedule more of these at any time. An important just comment being raised around how I think the technology was a hurdle for some. And so we really want you to know that we heard that from families and have been working hard to think about what are the ways we can strengthen what distance learning looks like, how we engage students from a distance. And so we're optimistic that it will be still challenging, but a more positive learning experience coming into this new school year. It was new for students, but also for teachers starting March 13th. And so we thank you that you understand that we are learning this as we go too, and our teachers have put in incredible amounts of hours to teach themselves this new style of teaching. And it's pretty phenomenal what they continue to do to strengthen that practice. So I want to just thank all of our teachers, thank all of our families, and just as we close, reiterate, we will assume that you are starting with distance learning per the board's vote on Thursday night. So you don't need to tell us if you are sticking with distance learning, but if you choose to have in person, again, 2 days, A-B, if you are choosing that, please respond to the text yesterday with in person, or call your child's school and let them know. We are so grateful to all of you, and we thank you. We hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we will look forward to educating your children in just another week, whatever format that takes. So have a great day.